Good evening. Welcome to this Alpine Property Live webinar series, Buying Your Dream Home in France. My name's Jonathan. I work for LUMON as a currency specialist. So thank you very much for joining us for this very exciting evening to discuss all things property France and one of my most areas of France, the Alps. So what better way, warm up a cold night here in the UK or wherever you might be joining us from, and taking a step closer to that dream of owning a small part of some of the best skiing, snowboarding and mountain lifestyle in the world. So I'm joined tonight by three other experts in their fields, Fiona, Gareth, myself. We're going to get a small introduction from them shortly. We've also got Richard, a visa expert. I think he's having a connection trouble at the moment. He may well jump in. But yes, the whole idea of this evening is to give you more information about purchasing that dream home in the Alps. Now, we want it to be as interactive as possible, so please use the question box there to raise as many questions as you like. We may struggle to get through all of them. We've got some pre-launch questions from some of you as well. Some have been submitted beforehand, so we'll try and get through as many as possible and help as many of you as we can. We'll certainly have all of our panel's contact details to reach out and discuss things in more detail. So what I'd like to do is hand over to some of my panel here just to further introduce themselves, explain a little bit more about what they do and how they'll be able to assist you. So Fiona, can I just check we're coming through clearly, and may I hand over to you for your introduction, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jonathan. So thanks very much for inviting me to be part of the panel. So I run international private finance. We specialise in helping clients who are looking to buy a second home in France. Some of our clients are buying a main home, but mostly it's people buying a second home who aren't living or working in France. We can help virtually any nationality. We particularly specialise in Brits that are living in the UK, or any nationality living in the UK, and also Americans living in the US, or any other nationality living in the US. And most of our clients haven't ever done this before, so they're really looking for advice right the way through the process. The buying process and the mortgage process is very different in France than perhaps we're used to, and there's not a huge amount of information widely available. So we like to explain to people how the mortgages work, how they calculate eligibility, what to expect from the buying process, and we hold our clients' hands throughout. So I'm more than happy to sort of cover some of the key topics later on, perhaps with some questions in regards to sort of how eligibility is calculated. I know that's one of the most popular ones, giving people an update on the market. Interest rates have started to fall in France, and availability of funding. The products and availability of funding has also improved.
Fantastic, Fiona. That's great to hear. She'll be hearing a lot more from you on some of those topics. And our sort of main man of the evening, Gareth, if we can hand over to you for your introduction, please. Thank you.
Hello, I help to run Alpine Property. I've worked for Alpine Property for almost 24 years now. Personally, I live near Morzine in a village called Saint-Jean-d'Eau. We have agents that cover all the main ski areas of the Haute-Savoie. So places like Morzine, Châtel, Léger, Samoin, Chamonix, La Clusaz, etc. So all these places are within an hour and a half, mostly within an hour or so of Geneva Airport. We don't have any offices. We never have. We started out on the internet in the year 2000 and have been happily here ever since. Obviously, because we all live in the Alps, we are good people to talk to about what's going on at the moment. We started out working mostly with British buyers, but now we work 70% with French buyers, 30% with British buyers. It's how the market has changed over the last 24, 25 years.
Perfect. That's excellent. Thank you very much, Gareth. So a bit about myself. I'm Jonathan. I work for LUMON. So LUMON are French property currency specialists, assisting clients looking to buy or sell property overseas. We've got a real speciality in France, working with all the lovely people on your screen. So we know the ins and outs of looking to purchase property from the currency payments aspect. So one of the things you like to do with these webinars is just try and find a little bit more about yourself, the audience. Of course, if you're looking to purchase an overseas property, it doesn't happen overnight. And there's a number of implications to be conscious of in terms of the timing, in terms of some of the information we want to be able to provide you with tonight. So thank you very much, everyone who's answering that poll. I see over half of you already responded. If we can get as many to respond as possible, that will be brilliant. So it just helps us to make sure we're giving you as accurate information as possible regarding your actual plan. So that's nearly everyone has completed that. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to launch one more. This is in terms of the financial period within which you'll be ready to put an offer. So certainly in terms of the currency aspect, this is particularly important from my point of view. Again, buying an overseas property doesn't happen overnight. And when we're talking about the currency aspect, there's actually a number of different options that LUMON can provide in order to essentially buy the currency, lock in an exchange rate, and ultimately know what the property is going to cost you. One of the biggest pitfalls with buying an overseas property where you've got the currency element is exchange rates can move against you and unexpected costs can arise. So yes, understanding the time period within which we potentially be looking at this does help us to give you accurate information this evening in terms of timing. So thank you very much, everyone who's responded. So great, we're going to get down to business. We're going to start reading through some of the questions we've had previously submitted. As I say, you can ask your own questions in the question box there. I can see we've got a few come in already. That's fantastic. We want it to be as interactive as possible. So right, let's kick things off. Gareth, let's go to you. And just for any of our viewers, perhaps not too familiar, and it's always important to discuss this, could you just talk us through the buying process in France? You know, sort of A to B, what some of our viewers, some of the audience will need to go through. They're starting out fresh on this and looking to buy a property in France.
I guess it's similar to the UK to start with. First of all, you have to make sure you've got the money. If you have cash available, that's easy. But if you think you're going to need a loan, the first thing to do is probably talk to someone like Fiona to work out how much money you can get hold of. The next thing is to get your head around which area to buy. About half our customers aren't too sure where they'd like to buy. They know they want to buy in the Alps. Quite often skiing is one of their main draws, but not always by any means. And so to get your head around the area, you've got to make some visits, and that's the fun bit. You need to identify some times, ideally out of the expensive periods, out of the holiday periods. Holiday periods are really bad times to come and view because so many of the properties are occupied. And if you're coming out with your family on holiday, trying to look at a property at the same time isn't a great thing to do. So I always say, if you're not sure, come and visit the areas in the summer and the winter to get an idea out of where you're going to buy. Then you have to make some appointments with agents to come and look at what properties are available. Sometimes British buyers think they'd like a long list of properties to come and visit all at the same time. That's not always that easy. There's not always the availability of properties. So you have to have a look at what you can and get your head around what's available and what the market's like. And then you make, once you've found the property you want, discuss with your agent whether or not they and you think the price is right and make an offer. The last couple of years, it's been a seller's market, so there haven't been many offers underneath the asking price. The market is getting a bit more equal now. There are a few more properties coming on the market. It's by no means a buyer's market yet, but things aren't feeling quite as pressured as they have been. So then you make an offer. This is where things diverge a little bit from the UK. Quite often you'll then make something called an offer d'achat, a buyer's offer, so a legally binding letter of your offer, which you'll be asked to sign. That comes before the first contract, which is the compromis de vente, and that can be signed in the first few weeks after making the offer. And that at that point you'll have to put down a deposit, which is negotiable, but 5 or 10%. And then there will be a period which will be a minimum of 3 months before you get to the point where you sign the acte de vente, the final deed, and at that point you own the property. So the fastest that will happen is 3 months, but it can often be 6. And when you take into account the time taken to choose the property, I saw your quiz earlier. Quite often people are looking for more than a year before they buy the property they're looking for.
Oh, thank you, Gareth. That's really helpful. I often say to clients, I use my father as an example. He took about 20 years to buy his overseas property, not because it took that long for the process, but just umming and ahhing. You know, this isn't something, as I say, that happens overnight. You know, you don't just wake up one day think I'm going to buy an overseas property and you own it the next day. It's often years of looking at these things, and I think that's why these chats, webinars are so helpful, because people can ask the questions and find out more. And I think one thing really interesting with the French purchase, so in the UK, we're used to the completion and the exchange, aren't we? And they're quite close together at the end of the process. You exchange, then you complete, sometimes a week, 2 later. But in France, with the compromis de vente, that's the equivalent, really, isn't it, of an exchange in the UK? And that happens really early in the process. You know, right, everything's locked in, this is going ahead, and then it's just really waiting for completion. Is that right? Is that fair?
Yeah, that first contract comes much more quickly, and it's a binding contract. There are normally clauses in it which allow you to break the contract if it turns out that the property is not owned like you thought it was, or the boundaries aren't as described. For instance, you know, if there's any major problems with the property, that will be a way out. But also, if you're getting a loan, that would be a clause responsive that you put in the contract. And if you can't get the loan, then you can't be forced to buy the property. But if everything's correct, and you can get your loan, or you have got your money, then yeah, you've pretty much bought the property at that point.
Fantastic, really helpful. Well, we're certainly coming back to you, Gareth, to dig a bit deeper. We've got loads of questions coming in, which is fantastic. I'm just going to go to Fiona. You know, we've got lots of questions for you, and we've had Christina. This was submitted beforehand, and I think you touched on this a little bit in your intro, but she's just asking, how does financing work in France when buying a property? Are there any extra implications?
Okay, thank you. So financing is quite different to the UK, and I wanted to start by just saying to people that 40% of mortgage applications in France are refused. In the UK, it's less than 10%. So just to give everybody a real feel of how much harder it is to get a mortgage in France versus the UK, we very much expect here that if you want to borrow money in the UK, you generally can. It's a matter of how much, what LTV you'd be eligible for, and what the price will be. But it's quite rare someone can't borrow money. In France, that's not the case. The criteria is much stricter. It's calculated differently. And so one thing that's really important, as Gareth touched on earlier, is before people go out and start looking and researching areas and properties, they've really got to find out how much they can borrow if they're wanting to buy with a French mortgage. If they're wanting to buy in cash or raise the money in the UK to buy, that's absolutely fine, of course. But I think it's really important for them to establish their budget before they start looking, for everybody's sake. And it's really hard for people to sort of work that out. We have a calculator on our website that people can go onto and have a rough feel, but everyone's situation is different, and that is just a general rule of thumb, if you like. So the rule of thumb is that no more than 1/3 of your income can be taken up with servicing of debt. So if we take that as a real example, if you earn £3,000 a month, £1,000 can be taken up with your existing debt and the new French mortgage, i.e. if your mortgage in the UK is £1,500, you can't get a French mortgage because you're over your 1,000. If your mortgage in the UK is £500 and you have a personal loan and a car loan, etc., you've got to just see what that difference is. So essentially 1/3 can be taken up. So if only £500 is a UK mortgage, you don't have anything else, then you have £500 a month that you can then spend on the French mortgage. And that's very roughly how it's calculated. The differences are whether or not a bank takes gross or net income. Do they take 100% of income? When don't they? Do they take bonuses into account? And it goes on and on and on. But that's the general rule of thumb. So it's much, much stricter than here. It's also, there just aren't as many banks lending. The appetite isn't as big. And we've got to bear in mind that it's a bit like a French person expecting to waltz into the UK and get a mortgage here. You're not living and working in the country. You've got no footprint there. Post-Brexit, there's very little checks they can do as well. So it's very paperwork heavy, as is everything in France versus the UK. So a mortgage is no different there. So it's really important that the first thing people do is find out how much they can borrow. And so by having a chat with us, we would be able to establish that after the end of the phone call. We'll run through someone's income and outgoings with them, run through their whole situation. So number one is how much are you eligible to borrow because of your income? You have to have an income. If you don't have any income at all, it's really very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very, very difficult. So if you're reliant on pension income, that is possible. But again, most mortgages in France have to be repaid by the age of 70. And based on the affordability being based on the monthly payment, actually, if you have a short-term mortgage, that could be quite costly. So firstly, you really need to have an income. It doesn't have to be salaried. You can be drawing dividends, it can be rental income, it can be a combination of different things. But there are certain things that you can't include. You can't include rent you get from an Airbnb. You can't include directors' loans that you're taking. You can't include commission or bonuses that you haven't had for a 3-year history. So there are certain things that you can't include. Equally, if you're on maternity leave, you couldn't include that income until you'd return to work. So I've given you a few of the things that you sort of definitely can't include, but that gives you the sort of 1/3 rule. And then the other major thing to look at, which again is not something that we would look at here in the UK, is how are you going to fund your contribution to the purchase? So maximum loan to values in France currently are around 80 to 85%, meaning you need a 15 or 20% deposit to put down. But you also need to allow for the buying costs in France, which come in depending on if it's an existing or a new property, between 3 or 7.5%. But let's take 7.5% as the most common for an existing property. In the UK, if you had access to those funds, that would really be it, end of story. You could borrow the money, your parents could give it to you. You could put it on a credit card. If you have the funds, you would be able to get it. In France, that's not how it's viewed at all. The banks ask a lot of questions as to how you're funding the purchase. They don't want the purchase to be 100% financed, i.e. they don't want you to borrow half in France and half in the UK. They want to see that you have that money saved up, and partly because their view is if you haven't managed to save money on your current scenario, how are you suddenly going to be able to afford to pay £1,000 or £500 a month towards a French mortgage? If you don't have enough to save anything on a month-on-month basis, how are you going to be able to afford that? So they're looking at what they call this capacity to save, spare income. The answer isn't we're going to reduce our outgoings. That just wouldn't be acceptable. So you really want to do some of these things to set yourself up. Have a look and see, are you saving the money? Where is our sort of deposit coming from? If it's coming from savings, that's great. If it's coming from a bonus that you're having, again, really, really good. But the negatives and the ones they wouldn't accept are you borrowing the money, you raising the money against your current house, you being gifted the money by family or friends, which lots of people are caught out by. So the sort of two main areas are, can you afford it, number one, and number two, what's the source of your money? Those are the two key areas that I would say people really need to look at to make sure that they qualify.
Fantastic, that's really, really helpful. And of course, you'll be able to speak more directly with Fiona, get a bit more of an update and an assessment on your position as needed. So yeah, thank you for the question, Christina. So one really for both of you here, I think we could get both of your perspectives. Philip Dawson submitted a live question. I'm going to ask Gareth first of all. Is it possible to buy a property with cash through my UK limited company, or better, to create a French company and purchase through that? So if I ask you that one there, Gareth, quite a common question we do see. I think people trying to work out some of the advantages and disadvantages of both of these options. So yeah, what's your take on that, Gareth?
Depends on the situation, depends what you're going to be doing with the property. So many questions. But you can certainly buy a property via a French company. That's done frequently. Even if you are buying it between members of a family, you might decide to create a type of French business to make the purchase. But I've looked at buying properties through my own business, and quite often the response once I've looked at it is actually you're better off buying it personally, because sometimes it comes down to how the property devalues within the company, how capital gains tax dealt with, that sort of thing. So it depends what you're going to do with it, how long you're going to keep it for, it depends on loads of things. So I will end up saying you're going to need to speak to a French accountant about your best options.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, another question where it's probably difficult to answer directly in this sort of setting, but I think the point, yes, absolutely, it is possible, and there's ways and means we can help. Fiona, what's your take there, please?
Yeah, thank you. So from a borrowing perspective, same as Gareth has said, we do quite frequently arrange finance for people purchasing in a French company structure, the two most common being an SCI or a salle de famille. From a mortgage perspective, the shareholders of it needs to be more than one shareholder. It can't be just one person. So if you're buying in your sole name, as I understand it, that isn't an option. So there needs to be two of you. From a mortgage perspective, everybody needs to be over the age of 18. We can't have a mortgage in the name of a minor. The mortgage is granted to the company, but the shareholders are personally guaranteeing it. So the affordability is calculated still on the shareholders. Often the pricing in terms of interest rates can be slightly higher. From a time perspective, I'd say we need to generally allow a little bit more time, because the company needs to be set up and the mortgage is in the name of the company. So we need to have the company established. We can have an approval subject to the setup of the company, so that's okay. However, your initial part of your question was whether or not it's a UK limited company. A French bank wouldn't lend to a UK limited company. And no, I mean, there's no bank in France that's lending against the French property would. So the person can buy in a company structure, but it needs to be a French company structure, and the shareholders need to be individuals rather than a UK limited company.
Fantastic. All right, thank you very much, both of you. I'm going to take a question now, quite a common one we see, and actually what I think is one of the most interesting parts of what LUMON can offer. A key thing, so we're a currency specialist specialising in international payments. A key sort of headline reason for using us is exchange rates. But the question is actually asking about a French bank account, basically saying, do we need to have a French bank account in order to purchase currency? So the short answer is no, you don't. And what we actually offer, once a client is registered with us, that's the first step. You get immediate access to what we call a wallet in euros. Now, this isn't actually a bank account of yours, it's a euro client account for LUMON. So very similar to a solicitor, notaire, other sort of professionals who will hold money on behalf of their clients, accountants, other so sort of professionals who look after client funds, special accounts, euro accounts for client money, and you access that through a wallet. So it's automatically activated when you register with us. Now, what you can actually do with a purchase is purchase euros and then hold them in this wallet, and then you can use it in a similar way to a bank account. Ultimately, you will want to open a bank account in France for living costs, utilities, other sort of ways and means. It makes sense, of course, to have a bank account in France, but certainly in the earlier stages, you might struggle to open one. Perhaps Fiona and Gareth there would nod and agree that you often need to have the compromis de vente signed in France to actually start that process. Some cases to have actually bought the property, to have the French address finalised. So it's not always easy to actually open a bank account in France. And even if you could, it's not always then easy once you've got euros in the French bank to get it to the notaire. So as an example, a bit like banks in the UK and all over the world, really, we've got viewers, audience watching from the States, Australia, anywhere else. Typically on larger amounts of money, you actually have to go into a bank branch to organise a payment to somewhere else. So if you've bought 150,000 euros for a French purchase, it's in your nice French bank account, you've then got to get it to the notaire. So you may have to book an appointment with that bank. Some of the banks in France, we moan about banking in the UK, and I'm not being negative about the French banks as such, but sometimes they're a bit more localized, a bit more regional. You may struggle sometimes to get on certain days of the week the right person. It's not always easy and straightforward. So yes, you'd have to make that appointment. There could be fees, you're trying to move this large amount of money. So with LUMON, if you had that 100,000 euros just in the wallet here, we help Gareth with his clients purchasing properties over there. Very simple email to us with the RIB, they call it in France, the Relève Audent Bancaire. That's how they produce French banking details, RIB it is called. You'll get sent that from either Gareth or the notaire involved with the purchase. And then we actually know a lot of the notaires in that area from many, many years of sending payments. But from this Euro wallet, we will make the payments under your instruction direct there. And it's as simple as an email and a phone call with us. So just a much simpler process. Now, this wallet that we have can also be used to lock in a currency trade when you want to. This week's a really good example. I'm really pleased to say pound euro levels are actually hit this week, the highest point all year. Now, some of you might raise an eyebrow and say, we're only 18 days into the year, Jonathan. Great, but it is good news. We're up just over 1%. So if you're buying £100,000 worth of euros, you're actually getting a good sort of 1,200 or so euros extra than you would have been at certainly some of the lower points at the start of the year. This is sort of changing every day, that you are, say, at some of the high points this week. So I've got some clients at the moment, they may not actually be completing on their property for many weeks, maybe months, but with the rates being better, they're on a budget, they don't want to risk things dropping, they've been able to purchase their euros, which are now being held in this wallet. It's a segregated account, separate from our business, special account for euros for clients, and the euros are there. And then when they need to pay something out, whether it's for the deposit or the balance, simple email and call with us, and we take care of everything else. So in terms of the answer to the question, do I need a French bank account to purchase currency or property in France? No, you don't. It does seem like an important thing to tick off the list, because of course you're going to be dealing in euros, but in these earlier stages, before you're sort of fully settled over there, you can utilize this wallet, and there's actually a number of benefits to that. So yes, hope that answers the question. I'm just going to look at some of the other questions we've had coming in, and we've got here maybe a topical one talking about climate change and things. We've got Jordan Hagenbeek. I'd be interested to know where you're calling from there, Jordan, viewing from. It's talking about expectancy on the development of prices in the Morzine area in relation to snowfall. And yeah, I'd be interested to get your take on this, Gareth. I know obviously there's not just snow, there's lots of other exciting things going on in this beautiful area of France.
Climate change is not a new subject to us. It was brought up when I came out in 1999. People asked me. In fact, my background is in fuel and energy engineering, so it's something I've taken an interest in for a long time. But now people are talking about it a lot more. And we have had some pretty tricky starts to the season this year, and last year have been good examples. So people are really starting to wonder if climate change is going to have a long-term effect. We wondered if we'd see properties come onto the market in the lower resorts after these difficult starts, but we haven't at all. What we have seen is more pressure on the high purpose-built resort of Avoria, and it'll be the same in Flen. We don't do so much work over in Flen, but the businesses are becoming more expensive to buy in Avoria, and the apartments are becoming more expensive. So we are seeing a price pressure on the high areas, but we haven't particularly seen an issue in the lower areas. For the future, what do we do if we haven't got snow in Morzine? Well, Morzine, Châtel, Saint-Jean-d'Eau, all these village resorts. Well, there's a lot of investment in snowmaking, and when it's cold enough, which was last week, they completed in 3 or 4 days. They completed the runs that run down into the villages, so that secured the snow. The other thing is the local areas are investing in other than ski activities. So the summer, they're extending the summer season. In fact, the inter-seasons that used to be quite dead are no longer dead. The spring, the autumn, and so people are appreciating the mountains for what they are, which is what brought me to the mountains. I didn't come here for the skiing in particular. I came here for all the other activities and the skiing. So yeah, we're finding that our buyers nowadays are coming for the same reasons that I came over 20 years ago. They're coming for the mountains. The skiing is fantastic when it works out. Tomorrow morning, in fact, the last 2 days we've had rain, but tomorrow morning we are expecting snow and sunshine, and we expect everyone to be making the most of it.
Yeah, fantastic. I know I'm lucky enough to have been at times to the Alps in the summer, and it's absolutely stunning. I mean, it's beautiful in the winter. It's always beautiful, isn't it? But yeah, very exciting, and plenty of things to do. Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for taking that one on, Gareth. Welcome, Richard. Hopefully you can hear us clearly. And let's get you a question, because I know there's a lot of burning questions. People want to hear you talk about your area of expertise, of course, visa and residency. So got a question here. Thank you, Richard. Yes, submitted. This is from Sandy Leonard. Sorry, no, it's Jeremy Blackney. Apologies, Sandy. I'll come to you next. Richard, please explain the visa options when coming from the UK with the recent change. So that's from Jeremy submitted. So yes, bits and pieces in the press lately. What's going on?
Yeah, so the recent changes haven't changed so far. So there was a vote that was submitted to Parliament, rejected, which was the idea to extend the 90-day rule to 180. To be clear, For people potentially that are looking to buy a second home, of course, that would affect them. But for those wanting to fully relocate, it was clear that even if that rule was in place, it wouldn't be a renewable type of visa. It would just extend your time allowance in the 90 days. For those that are interested, we've got a really cool calculator for that 90-day rule that's available on our website. So you can multiply your trips, because I know it sometimes can be a bit unclear. But if you were to want to be able to come and go as you please from France, a visa would be required. That would be for a UK passport holder applied for within 3 centres across the UK. Of course, we offer assistance with that. Essentially, those options of visas would either be a 6-month one. There's actually a 3-month one, but you could probably want to consider a 6-month one or a 12-month one. 12-month one being renewable. But for those wanting to permanently relocate, there are only 2 types of renewable visas: a 12-month renewable one, which is called a long stay visitor, or a talent passport visa, which englobes quite a few options. So for those thinking about creating a business, for instance, in France, that would be the same. But those all rely on 3 pillars of application: one of income, usually if you're buying a second home or a property in the Alps, that probably won't be an issue. 1,389 euros net times 12 in the bank account or in liquidity each month, proven. Private medical cover for yourself, or if you're of retirement age, an S1 form. But S1 is an option. It does kind of sign you out temporarily, at least out of the NHS, so to be considered. And third point, you'll need somewhere safe to live, so 12-month rental contract or property completed on purchase. So those are the rules for the UK passport holder, but anyone moving from anywhere in the English world has had the same situation before Brexit. I mean, this is obviously not new for our American clients or Australian clients. It's always been the case. So now it's just the UK is under the same branch as everyone else across the world. The new bill, if it were to be voted, would extend just that 90-day to 180-day. But there is, of course, in the world that we live in, a discrimination area that's been put up against the fact that why would British people be allowed to, and why not Americans, why not Canadians, etc. So I think that within that, the new immigration bill, which has been voted, is really something that is more towards, you've got to come to France with the 3 pillars that I mentioned. Other than that, it's still pretty straightforward. People tend to dramatize how difficult this is. It's doable, but you've just got to be well prepared.
Thank you. Very good answer there, Richard. I mean, I'm always struck, not just the Alps, but certainly some areas in France where I've sort of flown in, say, you know, down in maybe Limoges, or certainly Brittany, Normandy, some of the, you know, popular places with Brits there. And you've got like 6 flights a day, and they're all to the UK, you know, Manchester, London, you know, all over the UK. And there's 1 flight to Paris, you know, so certainly some of the more maybe regional places, you know, maybe not necessarily the Alps, but just the wider questions on this, you know, there's a lot of Brits coming in and out, and a lot of money, of course, for the French economy. So yes, it's important that these things are being looked at. So I'll say that's something that's always struck me. Sandy, I promised we'd come to your question, and yes, I think I'll go with Gareth on this, but you know, perhaps Fiona may have a little bit to add as well. Can you purchase a property and then let it out pretty much straight away with the idea to move into it ourselves within 5 to 10 years?
Yes, I can't see a problem with that. Certain areas of France, you have to ask permission from the mairie, but I don't think there are restrictions around us. I organised a rental recently, and I asked permission of the mairie, but it was a formality. But you have to remember that you need to declare the income to the French tax authorities, which on the face of it can be quite onerous, but in practice, if you do it right, it is very straightforward. You have to register with the local tax authorities, and the submission is literally 3 boxes to be filled out online. And if you're going to do this for more than just a temporary period, it would make sense to get your apartment classified, your property classified. So give it a star, get the local tourist office to give it a star rating. And if you do that, you get it halves the tax that you need to pay. So it makes a really big difference. So yeah, straightforward. And if you, a lot of people do it with Airbnb for good or ill, but Airbnb have been forced to pay the taxe de séjour directly to the local councils. So that saves some paperwork. But they've also been forced as well to disclose you and your name and your income to the local tax authorities. So don't forget, you have to fulfill your obligations, otherwise the French tax authorities will come knocking on your door.
And the good news is also, if I may add, there's the dual taxation regime with pretty much every English-speaking country across the globe. So even if you do declare taxes or become a tax resident in France, there's no dual taxation.
Yeah, and I'll just say that if you're living in the UK and renting out in France, you're not tax resident in France. You're just declaring the income. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Fiona, any other implications in terms of getting a mortgage and renting out the property? I know there are in the UK.
Absolutely, there are in the UK. So people often expect there to be, but no. It's a second home generally. People are sometimes buying a main home, but on the whole, our clients buying a second home. So it's very much on that basis, and there's no restriction to let the property out. Also, as importantly, there's no increase in rate. So in the UK, you see an increase in the rate if you're planning to go for a buy-to-let mortgage. One of the key differences, buy-to-let mortgages don't exist in France. Therefore, you can't get a mortgage based on the potential rental income. The mortgage is always going to be based on your current income.
Fantastic. Okay, we've had 2 people ask pretty much the same question. Gareth, I'll get you to take it on. We've got Michael Brooker and Charles, both live questions, basically saying, what are the taxes payable on purchasing a property and after? So I think I know some of the answer to this. Obviously, Gareth, I'll let you take it on. Yeah, so taxes payable with the purchase and then ongoing.
The taxes on purchase are called the frais de notaire. In English, we say that the notaire's fees, but it doesn't describe what it is correctly. So if you're buying a like a second-hand property, a property that's not a new build, that comes out at about 8%. So that would be what you know in the UK as stamp duty and the solicitor's fees lumped together, all collected by the notaire. If you're buying a new build, the government reduces the stamp duty part of it massively. So that comes out at about 2.5%. And I say about because it depends on various things. One thing being whether or not you take a mortgage. The fee goes up about 0.5% or so if you're taking a mortgage. So yeah, that's the taxes when you buy, and yeah, that 8%, that is a significant amount. So that could be described as a hidden cost. When you're looking at the prices on a website, you need to have that number in mind. Once you've bought the property, then it's the equivalent of council taxes. And they're fairly similar in how much you pay in the UK, the council taxes here. There's a slight change that's happened recently. So if you're renting the property out, then it's classed as a small business. So you'll have to pay a business tax as well, which is not insignificant. It's about 500. It depends how depends on various things, but yeah, 500 euros a year on top. So yeah, there you go. Taxe foncière, taxe d'habitation, and the new business tax. Those are the things you need to look out for.
Jonathan, can I just add from on the purchase that Gareth just went through there, just to be clear, you can't borrow that 8%. You have to have the money. So when we were talking and I was explaining two sort of key areas, one being eligibility and one being your personal contribution and where it comes from, the source, when you're allowing for the deposit, you must allow for that 8% as well. It's not something that you can borrow.
That's really
good.
Yeah, that is really, really important. Unless you're coming to live here, in which case you're a resident, then it can be included in part of your mortgage. So when I bought here, I included that in my mortgage. But yeah, if you're buying from the UK or from outside of France, you need the cash.
This is what makes these webinars so great, because you can read maybe one sentence on the internet saying, it may not actually be gospel, so we can sort of talk through all these points and get the little nuances that crop up. So if I can take the floor again, I've got a question here, and this is pretty much something I deal with on a daily basis. Essentially, we've got Rita and David asking about predictions on currency. What currency information can you provide to ensure I'm getting the best rate considering world events? So I think what the question really is asking there is, how do you know when is a good time to purchase currency? And as I say, it's something I'm talking about daily. I think the key point to make out is that no one knows exactly what the markets are going to do. I've done the job 14 years. I've never met anyone who knew exactly what the market's going to do. Often we'll see people who get a hunch or they think, oh, the rate's going to go up magically for me because I'm buying a property and there's a potential that it can. And, some sort of strap line really there is to say hope is not a strategy. Just hoping the rates are going to go in your favour. It can prove quite costly. So what we will do for clients is have a sort of detailed chat with them about, Gareth's helps you to do your compromis de vente, you've got the property going ahead, Fiona's helping you with the financing, you've got some sort of currency exchange to consider here for the purchase. So what I will do is have a fairly detailed chat with the client to understand namely their sort of attitudes to risk, because I described earlier the wallet. So if you're on a really tight budget, you just cannot afford for even a cent's drop, it's going to really cause you a headache. You've got a beautiful chalet there in the Alps, and 1 cent is thousands of pounds. You just can't take that risk. So you'd be obviously quite risk averse. So you could just purchase all of your euros very early on in the wallet. You've got your 200,000 euros there, whatever it is, and you don't have to worry about it. So that's sort of one side of this, taking a very risk averse approach. Other clients will say, well, look, actually, I'm aware markets can drop and they move around, but I am hopeful we could see a bit of an upturn. If I get that extra cent or two, this is going to become thousands of pounds less, save a little bit on my notaire fees that Gareth was touching on there, and it would just be good to see the rates getting a bit better. So for clients taking that type of approach, we can give you a bit more intelligence. As I say, hope is not a strategy. So what we actually do here at LUMON is look at all the detailed research from some of the leading banks. We look at about 50 different financial institutions. Now, all of these sort of leading names in banking, they'll all be producing their own reports and data on where exchange rates are headed. So just to give you a flavour of that, if you're coming to me and saying, I've got £100,000 to move into euros, what should I do, Jonathan? We can give you a bit more intelligence behind the decision and say, well, actually, out of these banks, we've got a range of about 10 cents predicted, up to about 120 as the higher points over the next 3 months, the lower points down to about 110. And when you consider at the moment, we're almost 117 in the 116s. This is the interbank trading level. We're closer to the higher points, so that's good news. You can also see some better news when we look at the average forecast from these 50 different banks. So the average rate predicted is actually lower than where we are now. So certainly a conversation I mentioned earlier, how the pound is trading quite strongly this year so far. There's a few green lights on here potentially for euro buyers. So actually looking at the facts from this research, looking at where the market is, looking at some of the things that are happening, you may say there's a balance of probabilities. You know, it would be better potentially to buy now. Now, you could purchase your currency and tomorrow the rate could go higher, and we can't sort of wave a magic wand and say this is the best time to do it, and say no one on this planet can do that. But we can just help give you a bit more intelligence to the decisions. We can look in detail at world events. This year, so much going on. You've got interest rate cuts by the Bank of England predicted. Inflation, some of you may have seen yesterday, moved higher against expectation. That's actually helped support the pound because it makes it less likely the Bank of England's going to be cutting interest rates quite as fast. European Central Bank, they meet next week. They're talking about cutting interest rates. The US Federal Reserve, the United States, for any of our American friends, they're talking about cutting interest rates. It's going to be a big theme later this year. If you're a bit of a market watcher like myself, very keen to see how these things go. And then you've got elections. You've got a general election later in the year in the UK, American election. Of course, Donald Trump's been in the news this week. So we'll have a good chat with clients, point out what's going on in the market and where you're getting these important data events. So as I say, yesterday with the inflation data, we were speaking to our clients who are in the market for currency, and we did manage to trade some people literally at the highest points of this year. More say luck than judgment in some cases. You know, the rates could have carried on throughout the day. As it happened, it peaked in the morning and then got lower over the course of the day. So as I say, we're not saying we're magicians or wizards here, but we can just use a bit of intelligence and our expertise to point out what's happening, share with you some of this forecast news, and just hopefully, as you can feel from this, give you a bit more of an advantage when you're making these decisions. So very happy to talk in more detail with anyone interested about the outlook for this year ahead, and not just on pounds, dollars, buying euros, but as Gareth, I think Fiona mentioned, clients from all over the world. So it was Richard talking about, Australia, New Zealand. We have clients all over the world bringing money into France for a purchase. So yes, very happy to talk that through with anyone. Right, on to some more questions for our panel. Richard, let's just come back to you. Got a question here about citizenship. I would love to hear, this is from Samantha watching live. I'd love to hear about how we can become citizens and move permanently to France. What is the process, please? And a little nod to yourself here, Gareth, and a huge thank you to Alpine Properties for their help in our purchase. Samantha Bramley, apologies. So Gareth, perhaps you know her, but yes, question there for Richard, please.
Hey Samantha, I think there might be, and it's quite often the case, a terminology problem with the understanding of what the status is when you move to France. So, and it's very common. People talk about citizenship, residency, and essentially there's only one route to any UK passport holder, assuming, or US passport holder, same from anywhere in the world. So it would start with a visa. So you apply first for your long stay visa. That would be with the aim of permanent move to France. That visa would allow you to arrive in France and settle in France. You've then got a period of 10 months once you've validated that visa to kind of get your ducks in a row, I guess. The easiest way to kind of put that to you is that there's not just the minimum requirements that I mentioned, there's also seeing satisfied how settled you are in France. And at that stage of 10 months, if you were, assume in this case that you're in a non-working status, as I mentioned, a visa with a working status would be slightly different, but just in term, that's all. But in terms of 10 months time, you would apply for what we call a residency card that you've maybe heard of, which is a carte de séjour. So a carte de séjour is essentially the renewal of your visa into a more permanent visa. Now that will be done in your local prefecture, and this is opposed to the process done in the country that you've left, will be conducted in a prefecture, which is going to be a French, a representative of the French government and state that's going to make that decision. So they can actually give you power, or they have power to give you up to 10 years residency on that card. That's what people would have talked about post-Brexit residence cards, people that are not French will have got those if they lived in France before Brexit and they got a 10-year card, and they would simply have to renew that. It's a process that's been in place. My parents moved to France 40 years ago before I was born, and you actually had carte de séjours back then. So it's actually just something that's come back into play for British people, but of course, it's always been the same for Americans. And basically, if they were to follow the rule book, it's 12 months visa, 12 months carte de séjour, renew it 3 times. You then get a 5-year carte de séjour, and then you'd get a 10-year carte de séjour at the end of that. If you're talking about citizenship, which is possible, citizenship can only be applied for after 5 years. So after 5 years of all this, you could apply to become a French citizen. There is a process there. There is a process which is more complex than the carte de séjour at this stage. There's also a language test. So many of my clients and people that are just in France without using our services will just choose to stay for now on carte de séjour, which is absolutely fine. There has been talk with this new immigration bill that in the future this might become more complex, and even for a carte de séjour there might be a language test. To be fair, of course, it's going to be useful for you to be able to speak French anyway to integrate into the country, and I think it's one requirement that for now you don't need to worry about. So if it is just purely relocating to France that we're talking about here, Samantha, and you want to make it long term, first you start with visa, then you validate your visa and you move to your carte de séjour, and after 5 years, if you feel up to it, you could apply for citizenship. After 10 years, you could apply for nationality if you wanted to. But again, you know, these are steps to take to follow, which if you want to, we can of course help you with.
Fantastic, Richard. Excellent answer. Now, I don't know what's happened, but it's only a few minutes left. I genuinely don't know where the time has gone. We've had so many amazing questions. I wish I could get through them all. Someone's asked, is the presentation being shared? Martin Vidal, yes, it will be. The presentation will be shared, so you can go back through this, contact all of our lovely panel more directly. Jordan, thank you for letting us know you were from the Netherlands. And Elizabeth, you'd ask how easy it was with the currency trading to get it successful. You know, we can't guarantee what's going to happen, like I say. We'll just try and give you as much of an advantage as we can. Gareth, I'm going to come back to you and stay with another question from Elizabeth. I don't know too much about this. I have heard about it. Talking about VAT back on a new build. So, you're nodding and smiling there, Gareth. Perhaps you can shine a light on that, please.
Yeah, this has been around for a long time. The leasebacks, they were big in the press 10 years ago in the UK press. There was a big building program going on, and people were selling leasebacks, and the big draw was the fact that you didn't have to pay the VAT on the leaseback. What they didn't tell you, well, they did, but in the small print, was that you had to retain that property for 20 years. And if you sold it before the 20 years was up, you'd have to pay back a proportion of the VAT. So this was a good idea for very long-term placement of an investment of money. And sometimes you could take a number of weeks yourself to have a holiday, but it was very, very restrictive. So they still exist. It's not something we particularly specialize in. We have been involved with them in the past, so we do know about them, but there's not so many leasebacks being sold at the moment. Also, if you're buying a larger property that you're going to turn into a rental business of some sort, so maybe a catered chalet or a type of hotel, then, and if you were building it new, you probably would make a VAT claim at the beginning, but that generally these properties cost over $1 million, and it's not for the faint-hearted. There's a lot of paperwork involved. So if that's what you're talking about, talk to us. We'll put you in contact with the right people. In fact, we have a help sheet we can give you. But in general, the VAT back thing is a lease back. So if you're looking at a lease back, that's fine. but beware of the small print.
Thank you so much, Gareth. I'm really sorry, audience, we've run out of time. And just to reiterate, all of the panel will be available for further communications to you. We will be able to get their contact details to you. We'll go around the panel and say a goodbye in a moment. But just to point out, we've got another Alpine webinar booked in for April the 11th. So yes, for anyone a bit longer term, we will be doing this again. We really hope everyone's found it useful. I've really enjoyed it and found some really good answers to questions, and it's been very useful for me. But yeah, really sorry, panel, we didn't get to ask you more questions, but I'm going to go around you all just for a last goodbye and maybe a little sousson, a little bit of information you want to share with our audience before we leave them. But Richard, if I can start with you, great to meet you and have you on.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for inviting me. Sorry for the late arrival and a bit of a mishap in timing here. But yeah, of course, feel free to reach out to us. We specialize in any kind of solution finding whilst moving to France and can help with pretty much any term type of request. So please feel free to come out and see us, and thank you for inviting us today.
Thank you, Richard. And Fiona, sorry we didn't get to hear more from you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. So I really just wanted to finish by giving people a bit of a taster that rates have started to fall in France. From the beginning of January, we've seen banks reduce their interest rates, and we've got rates now as low as 4.3%. So for people that were seeing them above 6%, which is where they got to, there has been quite some reduction already. We are also seeing more products coming back onto the market for non-residents. So on the whole, a significantly improved picture from where we have been for the last 12 months.
Fantastic. That's well worth bearing in mind. And Gareth, over to you. Thank you.
I wondered if anybody wanted to ask about citizenship and nationality, they could drop me a line, because it's something I've done personally and my wife's going through at the moment. Quite a lot of the people that live here are upgrading their status to have a French passport. You don't have to renounce your British nationality or your British passport. So many people out here have 2 passports now that have various uses. And the other thing was, I missed out a tax when you were asking about taxes. You're taxed also on your assets if they are worth over 800,000 euros. It's the wealth tax. It's normally mitigated by
3 million.
Right.
1 point.
Yeah, okay. I thought it was from 800 at 0.5%, and over 1.3 million it increases. But if you're buying a property over £1 million, you need to look at that. It's easily mitigated by taking out a loan, because that's not counted as the full asset at that point. Yeah, don't forget that, because that could be a nasty surprise if you've got a €2 million property and you're having to pay out a percentage every year just for owning it.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you very much to all of our panelists. I think one thing we'll all agree on is that everyone here is an expert. Many years of talking about these matters, and we'd be delighted to talk further with you, the audience. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. We'll see you all again on April the 11th, and thank you very much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your evening and have a fantastic 2024. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
bye.